Who was Bhante Suhita Dharma? This is his story as he told it to me. He was born in Texas, an African American man. He grew up at a time of enormous turmoil. At an early age, as he went out, he saw bodies hanging from the trees. Young men like him. The racism so condensed into such hatred that it was a living nightmare. The solace that he would find was with his grandmother, who had wisdom and love in great abundance for him and for him alone. He felt very special, very wise when he was with her. He learned many stories and many ways of dealing with trauma and pain. At a very early age, he entered the Trappist Catholic monastery, one of the youngest monks, not yet 13. His teachers were surprised to see such dedication, and they put him through several tests until they found out he was committed to such a path. And from here, one day they challenged him to enter another group. He took the challenge and ended up in the East Coast with fellow Trappist monks. Within time, he gained prominence in his circle, and he ended up going to the Vatican to an enormous convention, the Vatican II. At this rare, magnificent event, a historical decision was made that 4 monks of Christian Catholic background would go and learn from other spiritual religious practices. The most remote was the one in the Himalayas, and of course, Suhita being Suhita. He said, "I will go." And so he went and spent years learning the complex art of meditation. From there, he went to India and assisted Mother Teresa, and he provided enormous solace and support to people who were dealing with enormous obstacles and hardly any governmental resources. It was done hard and dedicated. It was done with great love and skill. And when time went by, he was once again challenged. His old teacher had gone all the way to India and looked at young Suhita and said, "I think you're ready." "For what?" said Suhita. "To deal with your biggest obstacle." "And what is that?" "Your own land, your own country." So Suhita got on the plane and came back to the United States of America. He told me he fell asleep in the plane and was feeling his great peace that he had earned in his months of meditation in the caves of the Himalayas. And in his deepest sleep and peace, he was awoken as if the plane had been shaking. To his surprise, the plane was flying without any agitation. He realized it had been him and he realized he had just entered the space of the United States. For him, it was a particular turmoil. And he landed right there in San Francisco. During his time in America, Suhita became my friend. Actually, my best friend for many, many years. The longest time in my life where I had had a friend. And Suhita taught me meditation. I really appreciate his teachings. And one day, while he was sitting at the porch in Northern California by Clear Creek at our cabin in French Gulch, he leaned to my wife and he told her, "Hey, you want to record this?" "I do," said Tessa. And then Tessa took out her phone and began to record Suhita's teachings and reflections on the importance of finding the right teachers for our lives. Listen now.
When you really find a good teacher is when you don't look for one.
Oh.
That's when you find it. Because all my teachers, I never looked.
Wow.
And in fact, we had a center down there in L.A. when all this stuff started. And when I was living with my teacher, the one in America, not the one that passed away. It's a whole long story. But anyway, different Buddhist monks and Hindu sannyasins and yogis, all these people came to visit our center. See, we didn't have to go nowhere. They came. Because when you come there and then you meet my teacher, he's going to have you teach. He's going to ask you, how long can you stay with us? How long can you be with us? And he said, I can stay maybe a few days, a week, or something like that, you know. My teacher would put him to work. Every night we had classes, on different Eastern philosophies, and so they would have to teach. So we didn't have to go anywhere, really. I could stay maybe a few days, a week, or something like that, you know. My teacher would put him to work. Every night we had classes, on different Eastern philosophies, and so they would have to teach. So we didn't have to go anywhere, really. They all just come in,
That's what me and...
Suhita was an HIV/AIDS community hero. And that is how I met him. We were going to Washington, D.C. because we had seen the inaction of the federal government to fight an epidemic. In that case, we had seen young, mostly men, dying in a matter of weeks and sometimes days. Because there was such an inaction, there was a growing frustration in the community, and that became known as Act Up. And the message was silence equals death. And we were there to speak loud and clearly about this reality, this devastation that was happening on the ground, and the need for us to do something, and quickly and effectively. The night before the conference took place, we had gathered and people had traveled long and far and were tired and were activists, and a great level of frustration had set in. And yet a guitar did appear, and I decided I would play a song. As I finished the song, part of the climate had changed, but there was one who was in a state of incredible joy, and that was Suhita in his robe. We spoke briefly afterwards, and to my surprise, the next day, I found out that they sat us at the same panel. The auditorium was filled to capacity. Loud and angry voices would come and go, sometimes in spite of the speakers. And there was hardly any agreement and no peace at all. Right before I spoke, the turn was for Suhita to say something. And given the pressure, each one was going to have of us 5 minutes. Suhita got up, took the mic, and stayed silent. Eventually, everybody quieted down. And then he began to speak in a quiet voice. And he said, yes, we are angry. Anger can be a good thing if we direct it correctly. Right now, I would like to ask, he said, if there's anyone who has experienced the virus. And to our surprise, hands went up into the air. And he then said, I will appreciate if one of you will just come and sit by me. And a young man with his dog, he came to the podium, and then we realized he couldn't see. He had his doggy for that. And he sat by Suhita. And Suhita just turned to him and said, hey, for how long have you been in this condition? And he described it was just a matter of months. And then he said, so what is it that you miss the most? And the young man said, well, I know I cannot really see myself now anymore. I know I am passable. But I would love for a human being to touch me or to make me feel they're connecting with me at this time. There was some tears. The mood had changed. And without losing a beat, Suhita leaned to him and held him. As he came to the end of his speech, there was a change in the audience. He turned to me and gave me the mic, and he told me with a wink, now it's your turn. Years later, I would look for Suhita at times when the odds were high and where the need for a radical action was greatly needed. He went to Juarez, Mexico, when the city was called Murder City. The level of pain was unbearable. And as we built and worked with groups there, highly dedicated in love and compassion, that involved going to the prisons and working with the widows and with the orphans, supporting organizations like Las Hormigas, a place where they teach the young people to find their way and believe in themselves and their dreams, in spite of being left orphans. And as we completed our trainings down there, we looked at Suhita, and Suhita said, well, good trip. And he stayed in Juarez for years. And he worked with people there who still carry that beautiful spirit of joy and compassion and are transforming and uplifting their entire community. At times, when there was a need for something major, I would just sit down and meditate, close my eyes, and mysteriously knew where I could find Suhita. He loved to travel, so finding him at times was not something for which you would get any aid. And yet, every time when I truly needed him, I found him. I would like to leave you with another recording done by the river, by a little clear creek, in which you will experience his laughter and his joy and his words.
Like, you know how we met? We met at an AIDS conference.
Yeah, right.
He was on stage playing the guitar.
Yeah.
And then when he finished, and then he had to come out into the lobby, I walked over and told him.
Yeah.
And then that was it.
We just
Click.
like that.
Yeah, just clicked just like that.
It was 25 years ago. I was 25.
He's the only
Get your age when I met him, who was my age back then.
Yeah, you know, he's the only person that can find me when I want to get lost. He's the only one.
Yes.
Even all my other friends and people I know, they can't do it. Because I like to disappear every once in a while.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, so then he's the only one, yeah.